The lonely deer finds rest. MMI. The lonely deer finds rest. On the matter of Psalm 21:22 Passion and Triumph of the Messias. Deus Deus meus. David complaineth in discouragement. He prayeth in distress. He praises God. Christ's passion, and the conversion of the Gentiles. For the leader over the choir, according to the measure of the hind of the dawn a tune unknown, a melody of Canaanite origin to Aurora, HR in Ugaritic, a psalm of David to golden-haired Esther, concerning the help of the continual offering of the morning. In reference to the morning offering which was replaced by the morning prayer in the worship of the synagogue unto the end for the morning protection. An individual's prayer, an allegorical allusion lamenting the vulnerability of human mortality and the tragedy of suffering in existence, and ending, on a note of trust, with thanksgiving for deliverance and remembrance of salvation. The hind is a slender and graceful creature, timid, sure-footed, and swift. When heavy with young, the hind retires to the recesses of the forest to give birth, and then continues in seclusion, tenderly caring for and protecting her fawns until such time as they can care for themselves. A lonely deer cut off from the rest of the herd and, threatened by a serpent of filth and punishment cast into the defiled world, is standing on a rock crag, hopefully gazing into day-stars dawning glitter from afar. Her horns, two bright rays, scatter morning's first light upon the earth. She gives forth those cries of childbirth, sundering the waters of creation, as she is about to give birth, and, whilst the doe's womb opens to her roe, the tortuous snake charmer Mehitable Bath Matrid, a copper maiden whose lower half is the supernal fire of Gehenna, sends forth another burning serpent to her rescue, a forged retribution to stroke and consume. And the kings that ruled in the land of Idumea, before any king reigned over the sons of Israel, were these: Baalhanan, Baal is gracious, son of Akkabor, a springing mouse, died, and his son Ardar, Hanan or Hardan, succeeded him, and reigned in his stead the last-named king of Idumea, and after his death, there began to be dukes in Idumea instead of kings. For, groaning or bleating, was the name of Ardar's royal residence city, an unknown place, and his wife was Mehitable. The goddess blesses who is blessed, daughter of Matrid, the spear of expulsion, fair-haired daughter of Mesoabi. Waters of gold. Compare Genesis 36 hours 31 minutes, 38, and 39 and 1 Paralipomenon 143, 49, 50, and 51. Composed of two main parts, this individual lament begins with radical despair, VV 2:22, and ends with thanksgiving and praise for the golden goddess of the dawn, VV 23:31. However, in three strophes, each corresponding to a change in mood and voice. In VV 2:12, the psalmist laments the conflict of nature between trust and faith, a cry of suffering vivid in its description of a violent, enduring death from mocking abusers. The second strophe concludes with an appeal, VV 20:22, to God. However, in VV 23:31, the celebration of imminent grace escalates verse by verse, to bear witness in exaltation of a cultic occasion marked by the mood of rejoicing after sorrow. Three times within VV 1:21, the tormented mind of the psalmist struggles through sorrow toward confidence, only to be overwhelmed again by despair. Sacred history witnesses to a God who is wholly enthroned upon hymns of praise as on cherubim, but, stripped of humanity, and reduced to the lowest form of animal existence, a temporary relief is only obtained in remembrance of God's divine presence from the womb. The savage animal imagery refers to the demonic influences of the plague god of pestilence, Nergal, and Lilith the Night-Hag, as well as the 7 Udugs. The 7 wicked Udugs, Akkadian, utukku, are the most fearsome of the malevolent demons, restless spirits of the dead, ghosts living in tombs, differing from E-temen-an-ki departed spirit, wandering impiously in darkness, spreading disease and disorder in the desert. They are insatiable in greed and relentless in pursuit, and their baleful influence brings terror and torment to all upon the earth. Note, both the Akkadian word sabachthani, a group of 7, and the corresponding Sumerian word E-temen-an-ki refer to the offspring of an, heaven, and ki, earth, who act as assistants to Nergal, error. Compare the 7 loathsome daughters of dog-headed Queen Bau, the daughter of Anu and the wife of Ning-Ursu, the dark-haired Lukur Maidens of the Lagash temple nether-realm, where Bau herself sat enthroned, wearing a headdress of 3 pair of horns. Her city was Gursu, Lagash, where King Guigno built a temple, called E-temen-an-ki, dedicated to his father, Enlil. In the highest his mother was a she-goat and his consort was Baba, daughter of An. His symbol was the lion-headed eagle. Now mark, the ziggurat of Marduk at Babylon was known as E-temen-an-ki, the foundation of heaven and earth. It had a base 100 meters square, and reached 91 meters in height, in 7 stages, the uppermost being a temple described as being built of sun-dried bricks, faced with baked, blue-glazed brick, the sacred bedchamber of the god's physical incarnation, containing a large bed and a golden table. The only human to ever spend the night there was Marduk's mortal mistress, and the Chaldean priesthood would practice the libidinous sacred marriage ritual with these women, before damning them to the infernal bowels of the structure. And, it was in these nether-realm bowels, that these lowest of the low necro-bitches practiced abomination, and, following are the tainted names of these 7 honey wolves: Zazaru, Nipi, Ernuntai, Hegernuna, Heshiga, Zagu and Zagu, and their unruly brothers were Agalima and Shulshigana. Times. The psalmist's enemies treat with him as one already dead, like alpha wolves fighting over a still living victim, uttering a naked appeal for help. Then, rejoicing in tranquility following deliverance, a public testimony exhorting all true believers to praise the Lord in consequence of deliverance from affliction, concludes in conviction of God's power extending beyond death, reaching even to Sheol, a dark, cheerless place where existence is reduced to just a short vanishing point, and the hopeless shades thereof lack meaningful remembrance of human existence. A first theological step toward a doctrine of resurrection, the words of my sins, that is, the sins of the world, which I have taken upon myself, cry out against me, and are the cause of all my sufferings. Cum root in venerem, blanditur echidna marito, mox satura incertum precedit or caput. Improbar palpata, tentigeni fervida connuus, continuo litum posit anhelavari. La viperia amarius esse monstra graciosa sun nouvel espus, puis sist trastrabist flambanti de corus luiva cuppant la test. Un fam macornti parsa lang alachanti couvre sun coya mari, it apres plein diada sun pauvre mary la mort el desire. While she's courting, the viper entices her mate. As soon as she's ready to conceive, she's got his head stuck in her mouth and bitten it off. The monstrous female is caressed and inflamed with lust, unable to breathe, she immediately demands the death of her mate. The lonely deer finds rest. Setting, the grasslands of North Transjordan. To the conductor of the ram's horns. A brief invocation of God's divine name. My God, why have you forsaken me, why desert me? Words of my sin, why art thou so far from my salvation, my roaring prayer? O my passionate and continuing prayer falls into an unhearing void. O from the words of my cry. Why do my cries of anguish bring no help? O my God, I cry out by day, but thou wilt not reply in answer, and dark of night is not silence for me, and no relief comes. It shall not be reputed as folly in me. But the 7 Udugs prowl, shooting arrows of pestilence as a plague for the recompense of the wicked. O glory of Yin wretched! Yet thou art holy, O my God, enthroned in the holy place, within the sacred shrine, of receiving the praises of Yin wretched. In thee our fathers trusted, they trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried, and they were safe, in you they relied, and they were not disappointed to shame. Thou alone dost set free. But I am a mere worm, and not a man. The outcast scorn of men, derided and despised by the people. All who see me scoff at me, they mock at me with parted lips, they toss and wag their heads and sneer. He relied on the eternal Lord, Jehovah, let God deliver him, quick become to rescue him, if the Eternal loves him or cares. 'Twas thou indeed didst draw me from the womb, and thou didst maketh me to first hope on my mother's lap. You have been my guide since I was first formed, my security at my mother's breast. To you I was committed at birth, cast upon thy care from my mother's womb. You are my God. Be not far from me now, for dangerous tribulation is very near, and I am in distress. Be near, for I have no one to help me. 2. A brutal horde besets me, many strong carved bullocks have surrounded me, the fierce fat bulls of Bashan encircle and hem me in, besieged. They open their mouths panting against me like ravening and roaring lions when they rend. My strength is weak, I am worn down, I am like water poured out, all my bones are racked, my limbs give way, scattered. My heart has become like wax melting away within my bosom's bowels. My throat is dried up like baked clay pot sherd, my tongue cleaves to my jaws, and, to the dust of death you have brought me down like a wasting disease, which strips flesh from dry, brittle bones. Indeed, many demonic curs have encompassed me, a gang of malignant villains, a pack of evildoers closing in upon me. They have dug my hands and pierced my feet, I can count all my numbered bones disfigured, and I am laid low in the dust of death. And my foes stare on and gloat over my arraignment, they divide my garments among them, and for my very vesture they cast lots. 3. A prayer for deliverance. But thou, O eternal Lord, be not far, remove not thy help to a distance from me, look towards my defense, O strength of mine, my help, hasten to aid me. Rescue my soul, O God, deliver from the sword my loneliness from the grip of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth, pluck my unhappy soul from the tossing horns of the wild oxen my wretched life. B. Then shall I proclaim thy name holy unto my brethren, in the midst of the gathered congregation I will praise ye, O God, praise the Eternal, ye, who fear the Lord, praise him, glorify him, all ye seed of Jacob, give glory to him, revere him in awe, all ye descendants of Israel. For Innes hath not slighted, spurned, nor loathed, and neither didst Innes disdain the supplication of a poor wretch in a despicable plight of misery, nor didst Innes turn and face away, to be hidden from me, but when I cried out to Innes, my appeal was heard. So, therefore, by thy gift will I utter praise in the vast assembly of thy great church triumphant, I will fulfill my vows before those worshippers who fear you. The lowly meek and pious shall partake of thy feast and eat their fill, to their heart's desire, they who seek the Lord shall praise him, let the Eternal's worshippers praise the Lord, wishing me long life, good health, and prosperity. May your hearts for I be ever merry. Men shall remember and bethink them of the Eternal, and turn converted, from all the ends of the earth's very verge, the kindred of all the heathen Gentile nations shall bow down in adoration before ye. This whole land bows to you, with all the pagan tribes, for the Eternal reigns and has dominion. The Lord o'er the heathen rules, he is King of kings over all of the nations, and they that be fat upon the earth, the prosperous people that have eaten and adored, all they that go down to the earth shall sacrifice and fall to worship you. O God, the dying peoples going down into the dust all bow before you, folk who cannot keep their own souls alive, and who sleep proud in the earth, their descendants shall kneel and worship you, and it shall be accounted that the next generation has the good news of the Lord. and for ye, Inus, my soul shall live, my seed a race, shall serve us. Let the quick becoming generation unborn be told of our Lord's saving deeds, that we may proclaim to a people yet to be born of the justice I have made shown. End not. The Babylonians, in coalition with the Medes and Scythians, defeated the Assyrians in 612 BCE, sacking Nimrud and Nineveh, and beginning the so-called Neo-Babylonian Age. This manifested architecturally at Babylon, destroyed in 689 BCE by the Assyrian Sennacherib. Nabopolassar and his son Nebuchadnezzar II dedicated 88 years to the restoration of its outer and inner walls. Its central feature was the Saĉjo, the temple to Bel-Marduk, with its associated 7-tier ziggurat, E-temen-an-ki, the Tower of Babel, the processional way passed northward from these two towers, its walls decorated with enameled lions, leading to the Ishtar Gate, and west to 2 pleasure palace complexes, and, to the east was the Hanging Gardens residential area first built for Semiramis, semi-legendary sorceress queen consort of the impious tyrant Ninus, Nimrod, the mighty hunter son of Kush, mothered of Mizraim, one of the founders of Freemasonry, and eponymous builder of Nineveh, who, allied with King Arius of Arabia, conquered the whole of Western Asia, commencing the pre-Babylonian era in Mesopotamia. And, during the siege of Bactra, the capital of Takharistan, Bactria, in northern Afghanistan, called by Arabs al-Balad, the mother of cities, he met Semiramis, wife of Menes, one of his generals whom he forced to commit suicide and took her, and the fruit of this union was Messias the Ninevite, Tammuz. But, the beautiful sorceress took her revenge, murdering Ninus in battle with a black arrow, after he had ruled 52 years. Beginning c. 2189 BCE, a white mulberry tree grew up by his tomb, by a fountain of cool water, whereby died the legendary lovers Pyramus and Thisbe of the many doves. Ne vous discouragez null hum. Marie de France, Lanville 146. The seed of women, her mother was the fecundating fish goddess Derkoto Atagares Dejra of Ashkelon, a flourishing Bronze Age seaport, until destroyed by the Mamluks in the 13th century, oldest and largest of the 5 cities of the Philistines. She was the great mermaid mistress of the northern lands of Syria, and her consort was Baal-Hadad son of Dagon, and her phallic-worshipping votaries, in ritual orgies, practiced emasculation, castration, circumcision, or vasectomy, until self-mutilation was banned by King Abgar. Huge phalli were set up like obelisks before her temple, which she climbed once a year, and ceremonious decorated the holy chamber, containing a great bronze altar, set about with many statues. Compare sexual union with God and conception of the divine child. The forecourt garden was freely roamed by all the animals but not swine and birds used in sacrifice. She fell in love with a mortal fisherman, and brought forth of this union a daughter's life, and for this was abandoned. Compare Dido and Aeneas. So ashamed was she that she gently lay her newborn down, and doves descended upon her whilst the mother threw herself into the lake to drown her grief and disappeared from the earth. The lake was the center of all sacred festivities. It was customary for votaries to swim out to a shrine standing in the water and decorate it, which is to infer sexual behavior. Semiramis was fed by the doves, until found by the royal shepherd Simers, and c. Now, masquerading as her son, the harlot beguiled and seduced Ninus' army into following her instructions, and conquered much of Asia, adding Ethiopia to her empire. The empress had fallen in lust, on hearing of the fame of the handsome Armenian king Ara, but was rejected, so she gathering the armies of Assyria and slew him in a battle, in the Ararat valley. Then, she tore his body to pieces and sent them out as a warning, and, in order to avoid continuous war, the sorceress gathered back the pieces, took the corpse, and prayed to the godlings to raise Ara from the dead, having disguised one of her lovers as Ara, to spread the rumor of her power of life over death. Compare Isis and Osiris, even as Artemis was later to substitute the hind for Iphigenia and rescue her from the fiery altar of sacrifice. Note, she is credited with inventing the chastity belt, as a form of torture. To sensual vices she was so abandoned, that lustful ire she made licit in the law. Dante, Divine Comedy, Second Circle of Hell. 2 millennium later, in Babylon, Semiramis is diverting the Euphrates into a huge reservoir which she has had evacuated, in order to build an underwater passage from one sinful palace to another. Queen Nitocris, Greek, following her by 5 generations, Herodotus Histories, 1:184, was last pharaoh of the Old Kingdom, and mentioned in the Turin Royal Canon Kings list as Nitikriti, Antiquity, and she was the first female pharaoh, sister wife to Anti-em-Safmiran-Renem-Ti-em-Safe II, who was murdered by the priests of Osiris in a political plot, a deadly rivalry later revenged by her, calling herself Nitikurti Sipta, as in the Abydos Table Kings list. No sooner was she inaugurated, and under this pretext, didst she invite all the suspected murderers to a privy banquet festival, and then flooded the sealed banquet room, a lavish subterranean hall, by a secret canal, with the waters of the Nile. Then, to avoid other conspirators, she was forced to commit suicide by running into a room of burning embers and flinging herself into the flames. She was a woman of great beauty, with flaxen hair, fair complexion and rosy cheeks. The long-lived, powerful and influential, Nechi-Adad-Gupi, BC 649–8 BCE, queen consort of Labynetus Sennacherib, was ruler in her own right in Babylon, c. 683–670 BCE, some 150 years or 5 generations after Semiramis. She died away from her capital, in one of her conquered cities, and is buried in a secret place. Her son was Labynetus Nabonidus, last of the Neo-Babylonian rulers. Now, Semiramis was a colorful militant queen, outshining both Halicarnassia's Babylonian queens. She built remarkable embankments to keep the Euphrates from flooding the plain, and irrigation works beneficial to agriculture, whereas Nitocris was more so concerned with Median expansion and war, consequently taking the precaution of changing the course of the river in order to slow down the approach to Babylon. Her chief public works were engineering achievements, reservoirs were evacuated, and the winding river was maneuvered towards her. Artificial lake quays and ramparts were constructed, and a great bridge was built out of removable planks in the very center of Babylon, connecting its two halves. A permanent bridge was later begun by Nabopolassar and completed by his son Labynetus Nebuchadnezzar, 605–562 BCE, which also created an artificial lake north of Babylon in the area of Sippar, also to prevent an uncompromising enemy from approaching Babylon. Nitocris, a complex and ambiguous personality, built her tomb in the Semiramis Gate identified with the Ishtar Gate, and it was engraved with this deceptive inscription: "If any future king be needy, open my tomb, and take. But the king who has no need of funds who touches my grave is cursed," establishing her control from beyond the grave. Her epitaph is unique in that her name was not recorded. One law for the lion and ox is oppression. And, when as last, King Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled the city for 43 years, starting c. 610 BCE, restored the hanging gardens to cheer up his homesick wife Amyatis, daughter of Astyages, king of the Medes. She was from a green, rugged and mountainous land. She found the flat, sun-baked terrain of Mesopotamia depressing, so the king built her an artificial mountain with rooftop gardens. The name evolves from an inexact translation of the Greek word cremastus or the Latin word pensilis, which mean overhanging, as in the sense of a terrace or balcony. In the 1st century BCE, Strabo, a Greek geographer, described vaulted terraces resting on cube-shaped pillars, hollow and filled with dirt and living plants, constructions of baked brick and asphalt, and water engines powered by slaves, irrigating the gardens with water from the nearby Euphrates River. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian, stated that the platforms on which the gardens stood consisted of huge slabs of stone, otherwise unheard of in Babel, covered with layers of reed, asphalt, and tile. Over this was put a covering with sheets of lead, that the wet which drenched through the earth might not rot the foundation. And soil was laid and planted with all sorts of trees for greatness of beauty and to the delight of spectators. And Marduk was restored as the supreme god, even as the Saĉjo and the E-temen-an-ki were restored to splendor. After conquering the Babylonians, 550 BCE, Cyrus, hoping to conquer her by avarice, proposed marriage to Thamyris, queen of the Massagetae, an Iranic people of Central Asia who lived eastward beyond the river Araxes, opposite the Sidonians on the Caspian Sea, a great warlike nation of nomads who destroyed the army of the Persians during their invasion and conquest. Cyrus had invaded and built a bridge across the river, urged on by the words of Croesus the Lydian, were it not disgrace intolerable for Cyrus the son of Cambyses to retire and yield ground to a woman. For she had sent him a message, "Go home, end your conquest and be content to rule in peace." Defeated in his initial assault on the Massagetae, the Parthians retreated, Cyrus laying a trap for the pursuing Scythians, a rich supply of wine. The pastoral Scythians were not used to drinking wine. Their favored intoxicants were hashish and fermented mare's milk, and they drank themselves into a stupor. The Persians then slaughtered the drunken Massagetae, capturing Thamyris' son Spargapises, the general of her army, whom committed suicide when sobered up. Thamyris again heralded Cyrus, and said, "Restore my son to me and get you from the land unharmed." Refuse. "And I swear by the sun, the sovereign lord of the Massagetae, bloodthirsty as you are, I will give you your fill of blood." Thamyris denounced Cyrus' cowardly treachery, challenging him to honorable battle. The Persians were defeated again, with high casualties, conquered and plundered, and for the first time the race of the Goths saw silken tents. Cyrus himself had fallen, after having reigned 29 years. She found his corpse, skinned it and filled it with human blood and gore, severed his head, and dipped it in, famously saying, "I live and have conquered thee in fight, and yet by thee I am ruined, for thou tookest my son with guile, but thus I make good my threat, and give thee thy full of blood." She kept his skull with her at all times and drank wine from it until her death. The true restorer of the heritage of Cyrus the Great, his son Darius I of Persia, was a fervent worshipper of Ahura Mazda, and was the first greedy ruler tempted by Nitocris' non-existent treasures. He violated her grave, desecrating and pillaging her tomb, and plundered a huge, solid gold statue of Bel-Merodach, establishing himself as king of kings over rebellious Medes and Persians. His rule began on the 29th of September, 522 BCE, when he killed a usurping impostor which had pretended to rule the Achaemenid Empire for 7 months, Magus Gormata Schmüërz, Bardia, the younger son of Cyrus the Great, whom, on his deathbed, had appointed as governor of the eastern provinces. Another son, Cambyses II, secretly conspired for his brother to be murdered before going to Egypt. Before his death he publicly confessed to his involvement in controversy and fraud. Darius boasted, who had the courage to oppose the false king, which ruled 7 months over the whole Persian Empire. His wife was Amastris, the daughter of Atanes, brother of Cassandane, the mother of Cambyses and Cyrus the Great. Atanes fathered Phedimia, the queen of Cambyses, and of her brother, the false Smedres, and he was one of the 7 conspirators which killed Gormata the Magian. The others were Aspatans and Gabryas, Hydance, Interphryns, and Megabyzus, as well as Darius the Mede. The Babylonian state revolted and the crisis was acute. Darius took Pheidamia and gave his sister to Atenes, the parents of Amestris, wife of Xerxes. The Greco-Persian War. Atenes was made satrap of Lydia and sent conquer the Greek island of Samos, c. 517 BCE, which had been without a strong leader since an earlier Lydian satrap, Orotus, had Polycrates impaled, crucified an undignified end for a glorious tyrant. Polycrates, son of Iases, was brother of Silason, father of Iases the tyrant of Samos, who was deprived of his power in 500 BCE, when the Ionian citizens were led into revolt by Aristagoras of Miletus, son of Molpagras, and son-in-law, and nephew, of Histiaeus, an advisor of the Persian king Darius I, whom the Persians had set up as tyrant of Miletus. When Naxos, one of the Cycladic islands in the Aegean, had revolted, in 502 BCE, the Persian overlords appealed to him for help, and he agreed, on the assumption that he was made ruler of the island. And, allied with Artaphons, the Persian satrap of Lydia, sent by Darius the Great with a fleet of 200 ships to annex the small island, Aristagoras promising to share in the plundered spoils of all the Cyclades and even Euboea, quarreled with Admiral Megabates and offended him, so to shame him in the Persian court, Megabates secretly forewarned the Naxians, who had time to fortify their city and survive the 4-month-long siege, 499 BCE, and ruining the invasion for Aristagoras. As the alliance with Artaphons dissolved, to escape the inditure of his promises, and the imminent danger of Persia's dire wrath, and aided by Histiaeus, he organized a citizen council and incited the Milesians, and other Ionians, in democratic revolt, so the Persians would crush it and install its instigator as tyrant. He was opposed only by a wealthy philosopher, a skeptic named Hicatius, whom mapped the world, and so occupied a high position in Miletus. As a composer geographical and historical works, he was one of those chosen ambassadors sent to the satrap Artaphons, to restore the constitution. His contemporary, Xenophanes of Colophon, the critical philosopher-poet who rejected anthropomorphic ideas of the polytheistic godlings, of Homer and Hesiod, insomuch as these being or resembling human form, amongst the first of monotheists, he reduced the godlings to meteorological phenomena, especially clouds, maintaining a concept of one God greatest among gods and men, one incorporeal perpetual in us, one homogeneous natural universe, immutable and incapable of change. In short, that inductively reasoned relativities are based on our observations of natural phenomena, as perceptions, and are only opinions. He believed that there is a truth to reality, but humans, as mortals, cannot understand it. And taught that if ever there had been a time when nothing existed, nothing could exist. When it was at its highest / it should not do fall. The tower is destroyed by winds and fire from heaven, announced on trumpet by an angel. In the foreground people lay mortally wounded by falling masonry while others flee in all directions. E-temen-an-ki. Thus began the Ionian Revolution, 499 BCE. So vast was the Persian Empire, and so minor were the Greek peoples, of which Darius was at complete unawares of the Athenians' existence, even as they assaulted him at Sardis. Aristagoras had traveled to a number of cities begging aid. Sparta refused to support him, but Athens sent 20 ships, and Eretria sent 5 ships out of a debt of honor to Miletus. An Athenian and Eretrian fleet had sailed an Athenian force to Ephesus, where they were joined with a force of Ionians, and marched on Artaphon's capital, Sardis. Most of his troops had been sent to besiege Miletus under the command of his brother, Charopinos, and another citizen named Hermophontos. He retreated into the Acropolis with a strong garrison, but offered no resistance. Although the Greeks were unable to take the citadel, they were free to pillage and raze the city, burning it to the ground. After the Ionian rebels and their allies had retreated to their ships at Ephesus, about a 3-day forced march from Sardis. Artaphons had gathered a Persian army and was met outside the walls of the city by the Greeks who'd rather fight than endure siege. Many Greeks died in the Battle of Ephesus, including the Erythraean commander Euacides. 3 times a day, Darius swore vengeance upon the Athenians, until they finally retreated to their ships and returned to Greece, with the Persian Empire avowed bitterly against them. The Erythraeans were marked for destruction, as well Cyprus was crushed and siege was subsequently laid to other cities all along the Ionian coast. And, when the untenability of position became apparent, Aristagoras fled north to Thrace, where the blue-eyed red-blonde-haired Thracians killed him for savaging their cities. After the sack of Sardis, though, the Ionian contingent was decisively defeated at the naval battle of Lade. In 494 BCE, Artaphons had recaptured many of the Ionian cities, and was laying siege to Miletus, both by land and sea. Now, the Ionians, in 353 triumphs, led by Admiral Dionysius the Phocian in a ship which was painted red, noticing that Ionian morale was low and suffered a lack of disciple, the admiral addressed his chief men, "Now for our affairs are on razor's edge, men of Ionia. Whether we are to be free or slaves, so if you will bear hardships now, you will suffer temporarily but be able to overcome your enemies." Over the following week, rowers were wearied in practicing naval tactical exercises for long hours, and dissension arose among the ranks of the Samians. Only 3 of their ships came to meet the Persian fleet of 600 vessels, and these exerted evil influence over the Ionian fleet, for as the battle began, many of the Ionian ships refused to engage the Persians. The 3 Samian ships eventually abandoned the battle. The 49 ships from Samos fell out of the line, followed by the 70 ships from Lesbos, beginning a chain reaction, leaving the city of Miletus to the Persians and their friends to be annihilated. Dionysius continued fighting, sinking 3 formidable warships, until, in the final hours of battle he was forced to retreat, ending his life as in piracy against Carthaginian and Tersenian merchants in the Sicilian seas. Athens was restored to power by the Persians in 494 BCE. The Persian War. In 492 BCE Darius sent his son-in-law Mardonius son of Gobirus, d. 479 BCE, Martozostra, to retaliate against Eritrea and Athens for aiding the Ionians in the Persian War, deposing Persian tyrants in Ionian cities. The general set up democratic governments, but his fleet was lost to a storm off Mount Athos in crossing the Hellespont, suffering 300 ships and 20,000 lost at sea. Mardonius was wounded in a later battle in Thrace, the Thracian tribe destroying a large part of his army. Nevertheless he was victorious, but the loss of his fleet caused him to retreat back into Asia Minor. He was relieved of command by Darius, who, by 490, appointed Datis and Artaphons, a huge Persian army of 25,000 troops, including cavalry, to invade Greece. And, having destroyed Eritrea, they were now standing on the plain of Marathon, near Athens, facing the Athenians with their allies, the Plataeans, about 10,000 strong and led by 10 generals. Callimachus was Polemarch, warlord. The Spartans were encamped near the southern exit of the plain. Offering blandishments to avoid a war, Darius had sent heralds to all the Greek city-states asking for tokens of submission, earth and water, to the assiduous bureaucrats of the Persian Empire. These were thrown into a pit in Athens, and into a well in Sparta. Consequently, it was around these 2 states that support gathered. A congress met at Corinth, in late autumn 481, and a confederate alliance of Greek city-states was sworn. As the Battle of Marathon began, the Persian line advanced. The Greeks thinned their center to cover the longer Persian line, but kept their wings strong, with the Plataeans on the left, breaking into a jog-trot once within bowshot. On each wing the Persians were routed, taking their cavalry with them in flight. In the center, the Greeks were forced back by the Persians, who were then taken as both flanks of the victorious Greek force wheeled inwards on them. Allegedly, 6,400 Persians were killed, but only 192 Athenians, including 2 runners, one who died of exhaustion after running 25 miles, 40 kms, to bring Athens the news of victory, and another who, before the battle, had run 150 miles, 240 kms, in 2 days, to ask the Spartans for help, but Sparta refused. Darius' defeat by the Spartans at Marathon, the 11th of September 490 BCE, and his subsequent failure to incorporate Greece in the Persian Empire is compared to Xerxes' marginal victory over King Leonidas and the 300 Spartans which made their last stand at the Battle of Thermopylae, in 480 BCE. Themistocles, c. 524 c. 459 BCE, elected one of 9 principal magistrates, or archons, of Athens, in 493 BCE, and, ostracizing rivals in succeeding years, he became the chief figure of Athenian politics. Aristides the Just, 530–468 BCE, who sought no personal glory or capital gain through public service, an arbitrator of difficult public and private issues, and a defender of the Athenian aristocratic cause, was ostracized for opposing Themistocles' naval policy, him foreseeing further incursions by the Persians and persuading Athens to strengthen her navy, so they were prepared for a second Persian war when Xerxes invaded in 480. The Persians had developed a new 3-level warship, called a triumph. He persuaded the Athenian assembly to spend the surplus generated from their silver mines to building 200 triumphs, and to fortifying the harbors of Piraeus. Although the Greek fleet had been entrusted to a Spartan, it was he who determined the decisive strategy that won the great sea battle of Salamis for the Greeks. Themistocles was the son of Neocles, an Athenian of no distinction and moderate means, who disowned him while he was still a child for behaving badly. His mother was a Carian or Thracian harlot and Abrotnum. He was a phenomenon of natural genius, extraordinarily exceptional by sheer personal intelligence with a far-reaching appreciation of probable future developments, both power-hungry and willing to use any means to gain personal or national prestige. The Second Persian War, Mardonius, wanting to become governor of Greece, had found favor under Xerxes. As an evil advisor he pressured him to avenge Darius. In opposition was another advisor, Artabanus. In 480 BCE, the Persian army and navy arrived at Doriscus in Thrace, a combined force in the many millions. A bridge of ships had been made at Abydos, in order to cross land troops over the Hellespont. Mardonius was present with Xerxes' southward advancing army at the Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BCE, where at a narrow pass ran between Mount Kallidromon and the sea. In northern Greece the track was so narrow that only one chariot could pass over it at a time. On the south side were the cliffs, and on the north was the gulf, now receded. Xerxes laughed at the thought that free men of any number ever standing up before an army unified by a single ruler, in obedience to that ruler and led by the whip he estimated outnumbering them 101. An allied Greek land force led by Leonidas, one of the 2 hereditary kings of Sparta, who led 300 Spartans, with 900 Helots, to most certain death, and the few thousands of Spartans, Thespians, and Thebans and other deserters, although vastly outnumbered, fought the Persians for 3 days until a narrow mountain goat pass at their rear was betrayed to the Persians by Ephialtes of Trachis, son of Eurydemus of Melis. 2 other conspirators, one Attas of Carystus, son of Phanagras, and Corydalus of Anticyra, were also implicated. Late, before dawn, news reached Leonidas that the 1,000 Phocians there to protect the route had encountered a Persian detachment, led by high dance, and had withdrawn to their own city-state. Ordering the main force back, Leonidas and a small contingent of 300 Spartans stayed behind to rearguard, joined by 700 Thespians who fought to the death alongside their allies. Plutarch, Moralia 225. 10, informs us that Xerxes had sent emissaries to Leonidas, offering the kingship of all Greece. Leonidas answered, "If you knew what was good in life, you would abstain from wishing for foreign things. For me it is better to die for Greece than be a monarch over my compatriots. Duty unto death." In one of history's most famous last stands, the Spartans fought and died to the last man, a symbol of courage against overwhelming odds. The Thebans, who had deserted the Persians at first opportunity, and whom Leonidas was holding hostage, surrendered at last. All others were annihilated. A reward offered for his death, Ephialtes fled to Thessaly after the Persian defeat at Salamis, where he was killed in an unrelated matter. His name became stigmatically associated with the meaning of the word nightmare, the archetype of the traitor. The Persians succeeded in taking the pass, sustaining heavy losses extremely disproportionate to the Greeks. Leonidas' body was recovered. In a rage, Xerxes had ordered his head decapitated and body crucified. After the Persians departed, ravishing Attica, menacing all Greece with inescapable subjugation, the Greeks collected their dead and buried them on a hill and erected a stone lion in solemn remembrance of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans. 40 years later his bones were returned to Sparta. Prior to the battle, the Hellenes remembered the Dorians, an ethnic distinction to which Sparta belonged, as the conquerors and displacers of the Ionians in the Peloponnesus. After the battle, Spartan culture became an inspiration and object of emulation. The fierce Spartan resistance allowed Athens invaluable time to prepare for a decisive naval battle. Artemisia I of Caria, Greek, fluid 480 BCE, became ruler after the death of her husband, a client of the Persians. She was daughter of the despot Lygamis, by race, a Halicarnassian, though her mother was a Cretan. She ruled over the Halicarnassians, the men of Kos, of Niceus, and of Calydna. Halicarnassus was founded as a Dorian colony, and was part of the Doric Hexapolis, the 6 original states of Dorian migration to the southeastern Aegean Isles and the mainland of Asia Minor. Although having soundly counseled Xerxes against a naval battle with the Greeks, she participated in the Battle of Salamis, 480 BCE, as a Persian ally commanding a Carian fleet of 5 triremes next the Sidonian contingent, the most famous reputation in the fleet. At one point in battle, on the verge of the Greeks capturing her trireme, Artemisia turned and bore down on an allied Calyndian vessel, ramming it amidships and sinking it with all hands, escaping the Athenian vessel. Xerxes, observing from on Mount Aegaleo, remarked that Artemisia was the only general to exhibit any bravery. "My men have turned into women and my women into men." After the war, she was spurned by a lover, so she killed herself by jumped off a cliff. At least 200 Persian ships were sunk. And the Achaemenid Persian immortals, the elite imperial guard of 10,000 perfect supermen of the Median, Elamite, and Persian races, were slaughtered to the last man when the Greeks recaptured the island of Psytalia. The defeat at Salamis was the turning point in the war for Xerxes. The Persian forces were routed and scattered after this decisive victory. Greece's independence laid the foundation for Western civilization. Xerxes retreated back into Asia Minor, leaving his army in Greece under Mardonius, who met the full strength of Sparta, leading a pan-Greek army, at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BCE. Xerxes attempted to build bridges in arrogant imitation of Nitocris, tampering with nature. Lashing the Hellespont was merely an assault against nature, as Cyrus, II, who had also asserted his power by cutting channels, merely deliberately punished and violated the river Guignes, to wage a futile war, fatal to himself, against Schmüërz, queen of the Getae. Gorgo, queen of Sparta, fluid 480 BCE, was daughter and only child of Cleomenes king of Sparta, 520–490 BCE, eldest born son of the previous king, Anaxandridas II, 560–525 BCE, son of Leon, 590–560 BCE, Leon son of Eurycratides the Wide ruler in whose reign, beginning in 615, the devastating war with Tga began, and his father was Anaxander, ruled c. 640–615 BCE, son of Eurycrates, 11th of the Ageid dynasty. Anaxandridas II, who finally defeated Tgaians, was long married without heirs apparent. He was advised by the elders to take a second wife, which he did, a daughter of Prinetids, the mother of Cleomenes I, an envious bitch which rumored against Dorius, his principal wife, who eventually bore him 3 other sons, Leonidas I, Cleombrotus I, co-regent, and a younger son which had vehemently protested the ascension of his half-brother only to be given command of an overseas expedition. Saving Sicyon from the tyrant Ischianus in the middle of the 6th century BCE is Anaxandridas' most notable accomplishment, this done with the aid of the Ephychelon, one of a citizen body of 5 elected magistrates exercising a supervisory executive power over the judicial legislation of the 2 kings of Sparta, who rarely cooperated with each other. Plato called them tyrants, little more than despots, while the kings were little more than generals. Cleomenes III abolished the Ephors in 227 BCE, but they were restored by the Macedonian king Antigonus III Doson after the Battle of Sellasia, and the position existed until the 2nd century Anno Domini, when it was abolished by the Roman Emperor Hadrian. Compare the Sanhedrin in Judea, during the Second Commonwealth period, circa 530 BCE to 70 CE. The Ephors presided over meetings of the oligarchic council of the Gerousia, consisting of the 2 kings and 28 elders over the age of 60, elected for life from certain most important aristocratic families by public acclamation, decision-making reached by a majority vote. The Ephors were personally at war with the Helots, serfs attached to the land as were medieval serfs, required to produce a predetermined portion of their harvest, allowed keeping the surplus. The lands of Laconia and Messenia were very fertile, often producing 2 crops a year, and Spartan measures were taken to keep the Helots from becoming too wealthy so that they could imprison or execute any one of them for any reason at any time without having to bring them to trial or violate religious rituals. Now, insomuch as Helots belonged to the state, and could neither be emancipated nor sold away from the land, the Helot population could not grow by means of purchase or capture in war, yet, despite massacres and other losses in war, their numbers increased whilst the population of the citizens decreased, but not to be confused with chattel slaves, which were almost non-existent in Sparta, though the rest of Greece had many. Descendants of the original Achaeans, the inhabitants of the village of Helos, in the south of Sparta, which did not participate in the Messenian Wars, 8th century BCE, and revolted, were reduced to becoming the first slaves, douloi or servi, of the Lacedaemonian state, although, after their conquest, the enslaved Dorians of Messenia also came to be known as Helots. Others called them penista. Helots were also common in Thessaly, Crete, and Sicily. They lived in family units and contracted their own marriages, in comparison to chattel slaves which had no human rights. Spartan eugenics were imposed, whereby not only genetic but also acquired characteristics were passed along as only the strongest and fittest survived, since any sign of weakness became a primary target. The Spartans used Helot women as a means of meeting the state's needs in terms of human resources. The bastards, Nutoi, sired by Spartan fathers of Helot women, held an intermediary rank in Lacedaemonian citizen army serving no military purpose. Girls were exposed at birth and left to die. Spartan society was concerned with blood purity in avoidance of intermarriage with inferior Achaean stock with its heiresses and girls of nobility. Spartan women wore a cuirass tunic made of wool pinned at her shoulders and having no girdle, being unsewn, so it fell open whence the wearer was walking, revealing her thighs. One side truly was covered by this garment, but she was exposed with the slightest movement. Nor was there anything shameful in this nakedness, all wantonness excluded, proud modesty and dignity attended these maidens. The two qualities Spartan women are most noted for is their freedom and respect. Sparta valued her mothers. They were permitted to exercise nude, which supposedly added complexion to their famous beauty, and they were literate, educated in Pythagorean matters. In other city-states most women were completely illiterate. And, in contrast to other city-states, Spartan women were given equal portions of food and were encouraged to marry only after having reached an age to enjoy the psychology of sexual intimacy. Nor were Spartan girls married to older men as was en vogue in other city-states. Their husbands were more compatibly near of age. A woman from Attica: why are Spartan women the only ones who can rule men? Queen Gorgo: because we are the only ones whom give birth to men. In other words, only men strong enough to accept women on equal terms are men at all. Spartan men tended to marry young by ancient Greek standards, in their early to mid-20s. The state considered bachelorhood a disgrace, and the man who did not father future citizens enjoyed less status. With their husbands confined to barracks and on active service till age 31, campaigning or engaged in political and civic duties, Spartan matrons controlled the family's wealth, meaning its agricultural economy, a sharp contrast to other city-states, as in Athens, for example. It was illegal for women to control money. Athenian women were never heiresses. Spartan women could inherit money and land. In no other ancient Greek city were women so well integrated into society. They can be compared to feudal chatelaines, the mistresses of castles, or the wives of Japanese samurai. And, most assuredly, the Spartan men were not so inclined to homosexuality as in the other Greek city-states. Lebensraum. Now, at about age 8 or 9, Gorgo, renowned for her political acumen and wisdom even then, informed her father not to trust the foreign diplomat Aristagoras of Miletus, trying to seduce and bribe his support in the Ionian revolt against the Persians. The stranger will corrupt you. Cleanthes, his trust in her acuity of judgment, avoided disaster then, yet brought about his own downfall, having interested himself of the world beyond Sparta, an interest not shared by other Spartans who followed the dictates of Lycurgus. Considered insane because of drunken sacrilege, he destroyed the sacred grove of Argus. After succession problems he went into Thessaly and Arcadia supporting anti-Spartan sentiments. He died in chains, self-mutilated, and Leonidas I, at once his half-brother and son-in-law, ascended the throne under mysterious circumstances. Gorgo's most significant role was played in the aftermath of the Battle of Thermopylae. A message from Demaratus had arrived in the form of a wooden plate covered in wax. It was she who determined to melt the wax. It was a warning that Greece was about to be invaded by Xerxes. Compare the scytale, a rod used for writing in code. A strip of paper was rolled slantwise around the scytale and a message was inscribed. When unrolled the dispatch was unintelligible, until once more being wrapped around another such rod. She mothered Leonidas one son, Pleistachus, Agiad king of Sparta from 480 to his death in 458 BCE, his cousin, Pausanias, 480–470 BCE, was the general who engineered the narrow Greek victory at the Battle of Plataea, which acted as regent during the early part of his reign. Pausanias made expeditions into Cyprus and Byzantium before being called home to face a circumstantial charge of treasonable negotiations with Persia. He was acquitted, only to be accused again, about 468, of planning a coup in collaboration with the exile Themistocles. To escape arrest he fled into a temple for sanctuary and was left therein to starve. Themistocles was condemned to death at Athens. His property confiscated, he escaped to Asia and was made governor of Magnesia on the Meander, where he was much honored and died in 459 BCE. Napoleon, writing to the Prince Regent after his defeat at Waterloo in 1815, compared his situation with that of Themistocles. Simon, c. 510 c. 450 BCE, Cyprus, son of Miltiades and the Thracian Hexapil, to whose ancestry he owed his great height, shaggy hair, and slowness of wit, was the most important artificer of the powerful Athenian maritime empire of the 5th century BCE. In conservative opposition of Pericles, prompted Sparta Callias, fluid 449 BCE, a rich and distinguished Athenian statesman who went to Susa to negotiate for peace. The Peace of Callias, c. 450, finally ending hostilities between Persia and the Greeks, had married to Simon's sister, or half-sister, Elpinic, for love and without a dowry. He had distinguished himself at the Battle of Marathon, and was a 3-time winner of the Olympic chariot races. By it, Artaxerxes agreed to respect the independence of the Delian League and send no warships into Greek waters. In return, Athens agreed not to interfere with Persian influence in Asia Minor, Cyprus, or Egypt. On his return to Athens he was fined 50 talents for betraying the city. He was also one of the negotiators of a peace, 446-5, which lasted for 30 years between Sparta and Athens. The Jewish occupational queen consort of Persia, Esther, and, when Darius seized the throne, he took Cyrus' 2 daughters, Hattuosa the Zoroastrian, BC 550 BCE Prob D. Beth. Xerxes came to power, and, a Chartistone in the Avestan language, Asher or Arta was of cardinal importance, representing the confessional concept of Zoroastrianism in opposition to Drach, or the lie, the hypostasis of genius or righteous truth. She bore him 2 sons, Arsames and Gabryas, and a daughter, Artazosta, who was given to Mardonius, son of noble Gabryas, and the woman Ardunamuia, mothered Artonce of him, both queen consorts of Persia and half-sisters of Cambyses too. And he took a granddaughter of Cyrus, too, the Elamite princess Parmes, Elamite Apamia, to legitimize his rule, and she bore him a son named Ariamardus. Mark this, Xerxes the son of Hattuosa, in the Bible is called Darius son of Ahasuerus, Dan 9:1, but recognized as Artaxerxes I by Septuagint and Josephus. Vashti, Esther, the morning star, was the orphan daughter of Belshazzar, her father dying before her birth and her mother dying at her birth, and she was the granddaughter of Amel-Marduk, and the great-granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon, when she refused to obey the king's request and show off her beauty by dancing naked in the banquet hall palace of Shushan, Susa. She was executed, for the fruit of her womb had been produced stillborn. And, she was one of the 4 most beautiful women produced in Inus, and is counted as a prophetess by Israel. Now, Mordecai Bilshan resided in Shushan, and he was a servant of Belmerodak. He adopted his orphaned cousin Hadassah, Esther, and tenderly raised her as his own daughter, keeping her nationality and lineage secret, until fair young virgins were sought, and she was brought into the presence of Ahasuerus and subsequently made queen in the stead of the deposed Vashti. And, after Mordecai was promoted, he discovered a plot of the eunuchs to put the king to death. An astrologer called Haman the Agagite, ca. 436-358 BCE, traditionally identified as illustrious Artaxerxes II, king of Persia, from 404 BCE to his death, the vile son of Darius II, Agag-Hamdatha, and his primary wife, a Phocian woman named Aspasia, Zresh, though he had more than 115 sons from over 350 wives, and even loved a young eunuch called Tiridates, who died whence he was emerging from childhood, human sacrifice, and a plot was instigated to kill Mordecai and all the Jews of the land he ruled, because they would not bow to him. The plot is foiled by the Jewess Esther, and Haman is hanged on the very thorn tree gibbet which he had built for Mordecai, along with his 10 sons. In rabbinical tradition, Haman is considered the archetype of evil and persecutor of Jews. When he was going to fix the day for the wholesale destruction of the Jewish exiles throughout Persia, he cast lots, until he found the auspicious zodiacal sign of Pisces. Now I shall be able to swallow them as fish which swallow each other. Isth. R7. Targ. Shani 3. Haman's lineage is also listed in the Targum Shani as score generations of sons, since Amalek son of Eliphaz, the son of Esau, his mother was a Hurit, a cave-dwelling people descended from Seir the Hivite. Mordecai Bilshan was descendant of Kish, the father of Saul, first king of Israel. Remember, in existence before the reign of Hammurabi, c. 1792–1750 BCE, the Esagila, temple to Marduk, is mentioned in the Babylonian creation epic, Enuma Elish, as being created immediately after the creation of the world. In 539 BCE, the Neo-Babylonian kingdom fell to the Persian Achaemenid king Cyrus the Great. Mesopotamia then became part of the Persian Empire. A royal palace was built at Babylon, and made one of Persia's administration capitals. The Persian king Xerxes crushed a revolt there, c. 478 BCE, and thereafter the Twin Towers were neglected and crumbled. After Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he planned to restore it to glory, and most of the debris had been removed in preparation for its reconstruction when he died. The temple was quarried for its baked bricks and now is a hole in the ground. Acrisius, king of Argos, and brother of Proetus, was told by oracle that he would be killed by his daughter's son. He shut her up in a bronze tower. Compare Osiris in the roots of the tamarisk tree. But, Dn, a descendant of the Egyptian Danors, in a shower of gold, Zeus descended and a son was born, Perseus. The king placed his daughter and her son in a chest and cast them out to sea. Compare Nu. They landed on the island of Surphos and were sheltered by Dictys the fisherman, who caught 2 fish. Pisces, brother of King Polydectes. Polydectes' unrequited love for Dn saw Perseus, a young man now, as an obstacle, and he was sent on a dangerous venture to the far west by the stream of the ocean, where were 3 monstrous Gorgons, Stheno, mighty a citadel, Uriel, wide-wandering and active port, and Medusa, queen of Lydia in her treasure city, daughters of the sea deities Phthis and his sister Ceto, and their sisters, the Gri, Pempherdo, Enio, and Dano, old age, grey from birth, and with 1 eye and 1 tooth between them. Medusa alone was mortal. Once beautiful, Athena changed her into a winged monstrosity, with serpents for hair and glaring eyes which turned to stone all beholders, because of her infidelities with Poseidon the sea god. Wearing Pluto's helm of invisibility and on the winged feet of Mercury, by looking at her reflection mirrored in Athena's polished shield, the hero slew Medusa, and, a moment after her death, she gave birth to Pegasus, a white-winged horse emerging from her blood foaming in the sea surf, and the gold sword Creusa, her severed head, once more, beautiful in death, he buried under a mound in the Agora of Argos. Cepheus, king of Ethiopia, and his wife Cassiopeia had offended the Nereids, boasting their daughter Andromeda to be more beautiful. Thereupon, the sea nymphs complained to Poseidon, who sent Cetus, a sea monster Perseus under the Pegasus sailed to ravish the coast of Ethiopia and the kingdom of its vain queen, Cetus, Latin Ctus, whale, Greek Ktos, a large constellation of the southern hemisphere in the water region nearby the other watery constellations Pisces, Aquarius and Eridanus. The constellations Andromeda, Cepheus, Perseus, Cassiopeia, and possibly Pegasus. Above it, its most notable star, Omicron Ceti, is the binary star Mira and Mira B. Andromeda, in the northern sky, contains the Andromeda Nebula, our nearest spiral galaxy neighbor outside our Milky Way galaxy, and is the largest of the local group of galaxies, including the Triangulum, or pinwheel, though our galaxy contains more dark matter. In antiquity, Cetus, far from the galactic plane, was identified with the primordial cosmic female principle, the sea monster Tiamat, and in Grecian proto-legend, it represented the gateposts of the underworld. A possible basis for the myth of the taming of Cerberus in the 12 labors of Heracles. And, according to Arabs, one of the hands of the Pleiades reaches into the constellation Cetus, wherein are, amongst the scattered stars, 2 pearl necklaces, one is broken and its pearls are scattered. The oracle of Ammon said that only the sacrifice of their daughter Andromeda would pacify the god's wrath. Accordingly, they chained her naked to a rock on the beach, exposed to the sea monster as tribute to Perseus the sea monster, turning her uncle suitor Phinus into stone. Perseus carries Andromeda off, returning to Seriphos only just in time to save Dian from the violence of Polydectes, also turning him to stone. After her mortal death, Athena placed Andromeda in the northern sky. And, after Perseus accidentally killed his grandfather Acrisius with a discus at the Larissan Games, in Thessaly, thus fulfilling the prophecy, he withdrew to Tiryns, founding the Mycenaean civilization, before withdrawing into Asia. Pus, son of Perseus, gave his name to Persia. Postscript. Soon after the departure of the Babylonian armies, Edom, in Egypt, began drinking the cup of Jehovah's wrath. Nebuchadnezzar's forces returned to Syria-Palestine for a further campaign. And the yoke descended on Edom's neck. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Yin, wretched, take the cup of wine of this fury at my hand, and thou shalt make all the nations to drink thereof, unto which I shall send thee. And they shall drink, and be troubled, and be mad because of the sword, which I shall send among them. And I took the cup at the hand of the Lord, and I presented it to all the nations to drink of it, to which the Lord sent me. Jeremiah 25:15 A wave of nomads from the Arabian desert began exercising power until, finally, the Nabatean tribe pushed the Edomites out. Thereafter, they were gradually absorbed by the Jews and, following the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, ceased to exist as a people. And Edom, the territory of wickedness, was become like Sodom and Gomorrah, a people whom Jehovah has denounced to time indefinite. Against Edom, Jeremiah 49:7-22 Thus saith the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more in Theman, counsel is perished from her children, their wisdom is become unprofitable. Flee and turn your backs, go down into the deep hole, ye inhabitants of Dedan, for I have brought the destruction of Esau upon him, the time of his visitation. If grape gatherers had come to thee, would they not have left a bunch? If thieves in the night, they would have taken what was enough for them. But I have made Esau bare, I have revealed his secrets, and he cannot be hid, his seed is laid waste, and his brethren, and his neighbors, and he shall not be. Leave thy fatherless children, I will make them live, and thy widows shall hope in me. For thus saith the Lord, behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup, shall certainly drink, and shalt thou come off as innocent. Thou shalt not come off as innocent, but drinking thou shalt drink. For I have sworn by myself, saith the Lord, that Basra shall become a desolation, and a reproach, and a desert, and a curse, and all her cities shall be everlasting wastes. I have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent to the nations. Gather yourselves together, and come against her, and let us rise up to battle. For behold, I have made thee a little one among the nations, despicable among men. Thy arrogancy hath deceived thee, and the pride of thy heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, and endeavourest to lay hold on the height of the hill. But though thou shouldst make thy nest as high as an eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord. And Edom shall be desolate, every one that shall pass by it, shall be astonished, and shall hiss at all its plagues. As Sodom was overthrown and Gomorrah and the neighbours thereof, saith the Lord, there shall not a man dwell there, and there shall no son of man inhabit it. Behold, one shall come up as a lion from the swelling of the Jordan, against the strong and the beautiful, for I will make him run suddenly upon her, and who shall be the chosen one whom I may appoint over her? For who is like to me? And who shall abide me? And who is the shepherd that can withstand my countenance? Therefore hear ye the counsel of the Lord, which he hath taken concerning Edom, and his thoughts which he hath thought concerning the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the little ones of the flock shall cast them down, of a truth they shall destroy them with their habitation. The earth is moved at the noise of their fall, the cry of the voice is heard in the Red Sea. Behold, he shall come up as an eagle, and fly, and he shall spread his wings over Basra, and in that day the heart of the valiant ones of Edom shall be as the heart of a woman in labor. The general judgment of the wicked, Esaias 34:9-15. And the streams thereof shall be turned into pitch, and the ground thereof into brimstone, and the land thereof shall become burning pitch. Night and day it shall not be quenched, the smoke thereof shall go up forever, from generation to generation it shall lay waste, none shall pass through it forever and ever. The bittern and Messias shall possess it, and the ibis and the raven shall dwell in it, and a line shall be stretched out upon it, to bring it to nothing, and a plummet, unto desolation. The nobles thereof shall not be there, they shall call rather upon the king, and all the princes thereof shall be nothing. And thorns and nettles shall grow up in its houses, and the thistle in the fortress thereof, and it shall be the habitation of dragons, and the pasture of ostriches. And demons and monsters shall meet, and the hairy ones shall cry out one to another. There hath the Lamia lain down, and found rest for her. There hath the Messias had its hole, and brought up its young ones, and hath dug round about, and cherished them in the shadows thereof. Thither are the kites gathered together one to another. The divine warrior dies in the Lord. Apocalypse 14:14-20. And I saw, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sitting like to the Son of Man, having on his head a crown of gold, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the temple crying with a loud voice to him that sat upon the clouds, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, because the hour is come to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle into the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and he cried with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vineyard of the earth, because the grapes thereof are ripe. And the angel thrust in his sharp sickle into the earth, and gathered the vineyard of the earth, and cast it into the great press of the wrath of God, and the press was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the press, up to the horses' bridles, for 1,600 furlongs. Adore God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Apocalypse 19:11-16. And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and with justice doth he judge and fight. And his eyes were as flame of fire, and on his head were many diadems, and he had a name written, which no man knoweth but himself. And he was clothed with a garment sprinkled with blood, and his name is called, the Word of God. And the armies that are in heaven followed him on white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth proceedeth a sharp two-edged sword, that with it he may strike the nations. And he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of God the Almighty. And he hath on his garment, and on his thigh written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Christ's victories over his enemies. Esaias 63:16. Who is this that cometh from Edom, with dyed garments from Basra, this beautiful one in his robe, walking in the greatness of his strength? I that speak justice and am a defender to save. Why then is thy apparel red, and thy garments like theirs that tread in the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people of the book there is not a man with me. I have trampled on them in my indignation, and have trodden them down in my wrath, and their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I have stained all my apparel. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, the year of my redemption is come. I looked about, and there was none to help, I sought, and there was none to give aid, and my own arm hath saved for me, and my indignation itself hath helped the ultimate mixed race that Jews developed over the centuries from the Oriental Prasiatic racial mixture, with a hint of the Negroid foreign to the daughters of Eve born from totally different kinds of racial elements, different from us in body and above all in soul. We would probably never have been bothered by them, had they remained in their eastern homeland. While some of them settled in large towns, trade and communication centers of the Mediterranean, others wandered restlessly further, to Spain, France, southern Germany and England. From there, Germany, they followed the culture-bearing and creative waves of German colonization of the East, until finally they found a gigantic new untapped reservoir of space in Poland and Eastern Europe. In the course of the 19th and 20th centuries, they spread from Eastern Europe like an irresistible tide, flooding the towns and nations of Europe, in fact, the entire world. Wherever these rats appear they bring ruin upon civilizations.